Hi, Barbara. Hi, Sue. Hi, Lori, who's not showing herself. Ariel, I'd love to see you. Says there are more participants, 14, so I don't know where they are.
Hello there.
Okay, now we hear you. Now press the little video
Camera.
icon.
No. You know that I don't like to be seen.
Oh, Helen.
But anyway, I'm glad I finally pushed the right buttons. I've been listening to you all the time,
Oh my,
but wrong buttons.
all right.
Ellen, we want to see you. I insist on seeing you. If they can see my funny looking ponem, they can see anybody.
Your poem is beautiful.
Oh.
Anyway, it's wonderful to see and hear you ladies.
Thank you. And gentlemen.
And gentlemen, sorry.
Always overlooked. I don't understand it, but
Oh, okay, Lori, I got your message. All right, well, can we hear
Hi,
you?
Jill. I haven't
Hi.
seen you in ages.
Jill, it's just your photo. I want to see you.
Oh. Oh, she left.
No, she didn't.
no,
Oh, there she is. Okay.
Nina and Talia are coming.
Good. We could use beauty.
Ah,
All right, let's see, who else? There's Talia, you're muted, just so you know.
Hello.
Hi, Talia.
Jill, you're muted. At least we could hear you. So, all right, well, we'll start. And if people jump in, I think we're going to do something that's really interesting. I've reviewed this before, but there are what I call 10 super mitzvahs. If you downloaded the handout, we're going to go over them. But I have all the Talmudic explanations, which if in this one, we're going to do each week or two, or depending. If you're a parent, it's really good news. If you're a child, it's a lot of obligations according to the Talmud, which are very interesting. But anyway, it says in the Talmud, let's start with a blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher
tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Right, Torah.
Amen. To engage
Amen.
in Torah. So according to the Talmud, there are 10 mitzvot that it says, these are the things that are limitless, that there's no end of benefits, of which a person enjoys the fruit of the world, while the principle remains in the world to come. So these mitzvahs, you get benefits and blessing in this world, but in heaven, you get even more. The principal blessings and merit and honor and whatever else is in the world to come, according to the Talmud, you get from doing these in this life. These are the ones that if you do them in this life, they benefit you for eternity. They get you in heaven. You're really blessed. And we're going to look at them, but if you'll notice, none of them are ritual. None of them are, keeping kosher or going to shul or, it's none of the rituals. It's even like bar mitzvah. It's not in there, but it's all in relationship to each other, except for the last one, which is the source of all the others. So does somebody have that page, want to read it?
yeah.
Okay, Talia, go ahead.
Okay, so mitzvah number 1,
Just
honoring
read the whole
one-
list. Read the list.
Okay, so not the definition of it.
Just start.
Okay, here we go. Got it. Okay, some basic laws of honoring parents.
No. Just
Oh.
honoring mother. I want the list of the
Page
10
1.
mitzvahs. It was the first page.
So
Says-
maybe mine didn't print for some reason. Mine starts on 2.
Oh, okay. Does anybody have page 1? Roy, did you raise your hand? Okay, go ahead.
Engaging in deeds of compassion.
No, it's Roy.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
10 super mitzvahs and what they really mean. These are the things that are limitless, of which a person enjoys the fruits of the world, while the principle remains in the world to come. They are honoring one's father and mother, engaging
Yes.
Go ahead.
engaging in deeds of compassion, arriving early for study, morning and evening, dealing graciously with guests, visiting the sick, providing for the wedding couple, accompanying the dead for burial, being devoted in prayer, and making peace among people. But the study of Torah encompasses them all.
Obviously, because you study Torah, you learn about this. And Torah doesn't mean the 5 books. Torah, the literal translation of Torah is teaching. And this encompasses all, the Talmud, the Mishnah, the Gemara, all the commentaries that, we study to understand these mitzvahs. So the one we're going to work on today or look at, which is, I was researching it and I knew them, but they really pile it on of how to honor your parents and how important it is, because in some place it says that your parents are like representing God, like they're the man. And why do they get that from? Because if you look at the 10 commandments, and the tablets, there are 5 and 5, the way they're written. And according to the rabbis, the first 5 are between humanity and God, and the second 5 are between humanity and each other. And in the first 5, so the first 5 are, I'm the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt, which is a belief statement. You have to start with that. You shall have no other gods before me is the second one. You shall not take my name in vain. Which means, making oaths or whatever falsely. So these are all in relation to God. Honor the Shabbat. Okay, that's God. And then the 5th one is honor your father and mother. And actually it's repeated a slightly different way in the book of Deuteronomy. It says revere or fear, be in awe of your mother and father. So they make sure that you don't put one over the other. And so because it's on the God in the God column, the rabbis say this really is a way of honoring God when you honor your parents. So it's considered very, very important. There is a caveat that we'll look at, that you can't honor them if they ask you to do anything wrong or break, the commandments. If they ask you to do evil, no, you don't listen to them, because God, everybody's obliged to honor God, and, behaving in an evil way would break that connection, that breach, that what's the word for breach? The treaty between us. Okay, so let's also, the word in Hebrew for honoring your mother and father is kabed et avicha v'et timocha. The word kabed has a root that also includes the Hebrew word kavod, which means honor, but it also, kaved means heavy. It's heavy. So it can be a burden, it can be heavy, it can be a load of, obligation to honor your parents. And also we should notice it doesn't say love your parents. It says honor your parents and be in awe of your parents, which is different. Cheryl, did you raise your hand? Did you want to say something? No. Okay. So that's where it starts. So let's just, I really want to hear your response to this. And there's 2 things. There's honor, which is the kaved, and then there's the one where it says fear or awe or revere is another way. So what is honor and what is reverence are 2 different ways that you are supposed to behave towards your parents. As a parent, when you read this, I feel like, wow, I should deserve it. I need to be someone that should be worthy of this treatment, because the treatment is pretty elevated. So what constitutes honor? Okay, Talia, you want to read that one?
Sure thing. What does it mean to honor? Sometimes it is not easy. The word kibud, honor, has its root kaved, heavy. It can be a burden to honor our parents. What constitutes honor? One must provide them with food and drink, clothing and garments, to conduct them home and take them out and rise before them. And one must provide them with all their needs cheerfully, even if one should feed them daily the most delectable foods, but does so with ill grace, one incurs divine punishment. And conversely, if one makes his father do hard labor, but the intention is good, for example, to save him, what is viz? Okay.
Vis-a-vis in regard to or something like that.
Okay. In regard to save him from a worse fate, and he appeases his father by showing him that his intention is good, one inherits the world to come.
Okay, so I just found this story in the Talmud. What are they talking about? If you feed your father the most gourmet, or mother, the most gourmet foods, and they go, oh, this is so good, and you say, shut up, you dog, dogs eat in quiet. If you insult your parent, even though you're going to go to hell, they actually say you're going to hell in the thing. But if, for example, they give this example that you work at a grindstone and the king calls for all the grindstone workers who are not working to come and slave for the king, you put your father to work at the grindstone so he can stay home and you go in his place. You know, so if you're saving your parent by doing something harsh, then you inherit heaven. So it really depends on the context. But what do you think about these obligations? Food and drink, clothing and garments, take them home, take them out. In other words, escort them to wherever they need to go and bring them back, the doctor, the synagogue, the park, wherever, the movies, whatever. Cheerfully, you need to do it cheerfully. So do you think that's reasonable? Do you think that's, what do you think about that? Let's just start with that. What do you think? I mean, okay, Jan. Unmute yourself.
Yeah, I was. Would you repeat it? I'm sorry, I'm having a memory issue.
Okay, you have to provide them with food and drink, clothing and garments, and conduct them home and take them out. Stand up when they come in, and everything should be cheerfully, with joy.
I agree with that. I don't think that it's done very much. But I think absolutely, I know that maybe not to the extent that like rising when they walk into the room, but I know that that is the way I treated my parents. That's not the way my children treat me, but that is the way I treated my parents. And to me, that's the way it should be.
Thank you. Okay, someone who else had their hands up? Cheryl.
Well, as you know, I moved my father out here 4 years ago and passed away a year and a half ago, and he had dementia, slowly got him a divorce. But anyway, he would always want to see me happy. He goes, I just don't see you happy. And I was sad a lot about dementia, this and that. And he lived with me for 18 months, and then I moved and then I realized I love being a mother, and it stopped being a burden, taking him to temple here, everywhere. And all he needed to see was that I was happy. He wanted to see me genuinely enjoying myself. And that really moved me, because if I'm not doing it wholeheartedly, then what do we, and it changed everything. And also tapping into how good it felt driving my kids around. I didn't see it as a burden.
Right.
And it was just moving into the full loving is just extraordinary. Now I'm so grateful we had all these errands and things and games but the idea that I think they want to see it's genuine, it comes from the heart, and it's not a burden was something very important to see.
Miriam.
I think I would put the word cheerfully, not at the end of all the chores that you have to do for them. I would put it right there in the beginning. If you give them meals, if you take care of them, if you do what you need to do, which is their fundamental living, and if you do it in a sense of, wow, this is a burden for me. Wow, you're difficult. Or if you give them any negative feeling whatsoever from you, any negative vibe, you are not helping their healing. You are increasing their illness, which they might not be able to show, something we cannot measure quantitatively. But people's illness increases when their entire psyche is not comfortable.
Right.
Give them a sense of guilt. Therefore, the word cheerfully has to go before anything.
And Jeff's gonna be next, but I just want to point out, no one's saying they're ill. They're just saying you have to make sure that they have food and drink and clothing and whatever. But you know, yes, of course, all the more so when they're ill, but they're saying if your parents need it, if they don't need it, but you can't let them go hungry. You can't let them go homeless. You can't let them go thirsty, naked, and you can't let them wallow. I think psychologically that they add, you should take them and bring them home is a big thing, because a lot of people, like, they pay someone to take care of their parents, but they never visit them. They never take them out for lunch or to a movie or to their house or whatever. And the rabbis are saying this is part of your obligation, not just to provide the material needs, but some emotional needs as well. So I think that was very astute of them. Jeff, what did you want to say?
I have a couple of comments. Number one, when I was in Los Angeles, I did a tremendous amount of surgery for the Jewish old home patients. And those patients divided themselves into two groups as far as outcomes were concerned. The first group of patients were mean and miserable. Their families never visited them. They were phobistic and angry. The other group of patients had visitations, had a positive outlook. We're still looking to the future because their family was involved with them. And they did the best as far as surgical outcomes were concerned because they remained positive. And one of the things, at least culturally, that may relate to this is that though I took care of my parents physically with every need for over 35 years all over this country, it seems to be a lost obligation. Unlike other countries in the world, Asian countries have great respect for their elders and take care of them in their home. The Latin countries similarly. What do we have? We have assisted living. We have discarding adults at a certain point to homes for dementia. We have, it seems, an ability to look past this religious, cultural, spiritual obligation that these people formed us. And it's a great loss.
It is. Who else? Anybody else want to say something? Robert? You're muted. You're muted. Robert, you're muted.
Got it.
Okay.
Hi. Kind of following up on Jeff and Miriam, I think this is really about the circle of life and how your parents were there for you when you were dependent. And they say that aging is like a return to childhood and that you become more dependent on others. The big difference, which is where I think the cheerfulness comes in, is an adult that has lost capacity knows who they were, and I would imagine to some extent longs to have back the capacity that they're losing as they deteriorate with age. And so the worst thing you could do to someone who is proud and independent is remind them that they're less than now and aren't the same person they were and worthy of the same love and respect.
Okay, I agree. All right, Talia, I want to respond, but I want to hear from Talia too.
Oh, I just wanted to say that it's so easy to judge people and how they handle their elderly parents or parents in general, because we don't know. Like, we don't know what the story is. So right now, my mom's living with me and she may need professional care. Like, I may not be the safest place for her to live. I think right now I am, but you know, when you deal with dementia or you deal with like other things, sometimes people need special workers. And I'm not trained in certain things, but yes, visiting, super important. But that whole idea of judging others for how they handle things. I know that, you know, Sadie did that Tikkun Olam project where she went and sang at homes for the elderly and or assisted living homes. And some of these people, the people that work there, said they have no visitors, and they would take her little card that she gave them and put it up in their room because they had no relatives visiting them. So that's heartbreaking, but we don't know what the circumstances are. You know, it's so easy to judge, but it's just best to do the right thing and lead by example.
Thank you. I was going to say, and I agree with everything people have said, we have to remember at the time of the rabbis, first of all, most people didn't live that long, number one. Number two, people lived with their children, near their children and their grandchildren. So there was support for an elderly grandmother. There were adult grandchildren, there were kids, there were there was a larger community as opposed to in this country in particular, you know, we're all over, we're far away. So that's another, you know, obstacle. And also because people are living so long, a 90-year-old person may have a 70-year-old child who has their own challenges or their own health issues. And so as much as you want to, you may not be able to, you know, you may, we have about like 300 congregants over 80 in this temple. And we have like 100 or something over 90. We have people 95 to 100. There must be like 30 or 40. Now their kids are 75 and they don't have it either. So, you know, so it's complicated. And, you know, it doesn't say you have to live with them and take them into your home. It says you have to give them food and drink and clothing and basically visit them, conduct them home and can take them out. So, you know, I think, and cheerfully. So it's like, with love, we do the best we can. It's the people who just like dump them and never show up. That's what we're talking about, Sue.
Okay. Tom and I have talked about what would we do when we reach an age. And I would rather, if we, God forbid, one of us passes away, I don't want to be in my home with a caretaker. I want to be around people if I'm at an age. And so I think, to second kind of what Talia said, when you say, oh, you put your mother or your father in a home, it could be a much more positive thing than a negative thing. And at least for me, it's something I would, as I said, I want to be around people. I don't want to be home with a caretaker. I don't think I'd want to be with my kids either, to tell you the truth.
Right, because you'll be home and they'll be running around and they're not gonna, it's Abby.
Well, I wasn't here for the very beginning, but what Robert said about the circle of life, and it's always a hard thing when I saw that you're going
Oh my. Hello.
Wait, who's talking?
That's Helen. Maybe you should mute
Helen. Helen.
Oh my goodness, you're bringing goodies.
I'm bringing goodies.
Why don't you mute? Okay. When I saw this, it's always a hard thing for me because my mother was alcoholic. I had a terrible upbringing, terrible, but I had my grandmother. Okay. And I was very close to my grandmother. My mother was terrible to her own mother and to me. So it's always very difficult. But for my grandmother, I was there for her for everything because, like, as Robert said, it's a circle of life. She gave me the nurturance as a young child and growing up, but my mother didn't. So it's, you know, you don't know what's there. And so it's always hard, like, you know, with the holidays and they have all of this, and it's such a terrible, it's so hard for me.
I'm sorry about that.
Well, I mean, it's just, but it has gave me resilience.
How can I tell her, sorry that I have to go?
Okay, go ahead. Bye.
Hi. Oh, you heard me.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I got a visitor.
I
got a visitor. Here,
Okay, bye-bye.
love you, bye, thank you.
Okay, let's continue.
I'm
It
gonna get
even
my
goes
pants.
further.
You see?
Also, one must perform for parents all such services as a servant performs for his master, and one is duty bound to render personal services even at personal expense. Wow. Now here, this one is really extreme. Who wants to read this one? It's really extreme. Anybody? All right, I'll read it. To what lengths should the duty of honoring parents go? Even were they to take his purse full of gold and cast it into the sea in his presence, he must not shame them, manifest grief in their presence, or display anger, but accept the divine decree without demur. Wow. So if your parents take all your money and throw it in the sea in front of you, you have to say nothing. So this is pretty extreme. Let's analyze these rabbis. Why do you think they would go to such an extreme? I mean, what do you think? I mean, that is really like they're saying, no matter what, you don't humiliate them, you don't complain. Do we think that maybe people were not treating their parents well, and so they had to make a point so strong, perhaps? I mean, I always say when they tell you to do something strongly, it's because nobody's doing it. They're breaking the rules. And so, but what do we think about that? Do we feel that parents should basically could do whatever they want to us and we have to accept it? How do we feel about that today? People are shaking
how about
their
a
heads.
simple example?
What?
How about a simple example?
Like?
You have a 75-year-old parent, and that parent is still driving, and yet a week ago backed into a car in a shopping mall. Now you've raised the question with them, what do you do? Do you take their license away from them? Do you subject them against their will, so to speak, to a driving test by the license bureau? These are things that are common today, and yet this is exactly the type of restrictions and limitations on parental privilege that you're interdicting as a child. Is it a sign of dishonor? Is it for safety? How would you make those decisions if it wasn't in the best spirit for them?
That's a good question. Roy?
Well, I think to address Jeff about the driving issue, I had to deal with that with my father. And I think the sort of maybe the overriding principle that one considers the health of the community, as well as the health of the parent. And so if the parent is not capable of creating a safe environment for the community, then it's probably best that we work on taking away that license, because you don't want to to kill someone because you don't have the facilities to drive safely. I'm trying to think of other things I wanted to say. I had them in my mind, but
well, it's interesting. You're right. And here it says you should take them home and take them out. So here we're getting that little thing of when they can no longer drive, we need to find a way for them to still get out of the house, still get into the world. Who knows, like maybe in the next 5-10 years, there'll be driverless cars, which will be so great for older people, because then you can get in your car and just talk or tell them the address and the car will take you and you won't have to drive. But exactly, I mean, you're right, Jeff. There are times when you have to override the respect for the sake of preserving life, because preserving life overrides everything else. You have to save a life. So that would be one of those cases. So now let's look at reverence or awe. What is the difference between honor and awe or reverence? And this is like really more of symbols of respect as opposed to behavior. So does anybody have it who wants to read that one? Susan Ehrlich. You're muted. Now you're, okay.
Put your volume up, Susan.
No, wait, Don, are you unmuting people?
Okay, wait, I got it now.
Okay, go ahead.
One must not stand in the place appointed for his father, in a council of elders or the place reserved for him to pray. One must not sit in the seat generally occupied by his father. One must not contradict his father's words, nor corroborate his words in his presence. Even to say father's opinion appears correct, nor call him while alive or dead by his name.
Wow. Okay, so you don't sit in your father's chair. Did anybody have that growing up where your father had the chair, a chair, at the head of the table? Lori, do you want to say something about that? Wait, you're muted.
It was.
Wait, Don Levy, will you unmute people, please? Don Levy. Okay, Lori, try. Okay, Lori, try again. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. In our family, it was the chair in front of the TV that was Dad's chair, and you better just, if he was home, you weren't sitting in that chair. But this one has been interesting for me because, first of all, I lived far from my parents, and that was hard. And second of all, the only thing my mother and I ever fought about was her health care. So I don't know if how that fits into this whole thing about honoring your parents. She was not happy with me for doing that. But I felt it was important for her health that certain things had to be done and certain things had to be taken care of. And actually with my father who had dementia, we had to take the keys away. I mean, there was just, so there's neither time were my parents happy with us, my brother and I, but the reality was that we were saving something worse from happening. My brother thinking my father was gonna kill a kid on a bike, you know, my mother's health was not being well cared for if she didn't take her medicines on time. So to me, I was honoring them, but boy, I was feisty about it. And now I'm feeling bad about that.
Well, I don't think you should feel bad about taking care of your parents, but I wonder if this is just reminding us, it's not just what we do, but how we do it, what our words are, what our love, what our expression is, what is, you know, I love you so much and I'm worried about you and I know you're upset, but, you know, so there's a way to perhaps broach it or, you know, bring it up in a way that they feel that they're being cared for as opposed to being punished. It's all about the psychological of it. Right, but here it says you're not supposed to contradict your father's words like you're wrong, but even he's right. They're saying you shouldn't say, and you don't call him Sam, you call him father, you don't call him, you know, my dad was Lenny. So that's disrespectful. So the difference between honor and reverence seems to be one is physical care and one is kind of just giving them the respect that, you know, as a human being, as your parent. So now it says, whoops, to what lengths should the duty of revering parents go? Even, this is the son, even if he is attired in costly garments, presiding over a meeting, and his parents come and rend his garments, tear his clothes, strike him on the head, and spit in his face. You must not shame them, but should remain silent and fear the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be he who is thus decreed. Okay. What do we think about that?
Wow.
Makes me think about Job.
Job, yeah.
That
is Job. Okay.
Susan, what is Hilchos Mamrim?
It's I think it's like one of the commentaries from like the Shulchan Aruch. It's got to be some part of the Talmud. Yeah. You know, it's got to be one of the parts of the Talmud, basically. or one of the commentaries on the Talmud. So this is their opinion. I would say, I want to hear what you have to say, but if they're doing that, they're mentally ill.
Yeah.
And that's why you don't yell at them, because they don't know what they're doing. I think, implied in that is any parent who would do that is disturbed. And if they do that and they come in and whatever, you have to be calm and remove them or take care of them, as opposed to scream and humiliate them, because I can't imagine parents ripping a kid's clothes, hitting him on the head and spitting in his face unless they are emotionally disturbed.
Yeah, in
And
front of
I
a
think
kid
that's
really
what they're
deserves it.
talking-
Alcoholic parents do that.
Or alcoholic parent. Oh, they do.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes,
Well,
they do.
But also, when my brother died, I saw my former mother-in-law at her husband, my former father-in-law's funeral. She took a shower, she got dressed, she put on some makeup, she was presentable, she proceeded with her husband's funeral with grace and dignity. And I wanted to do that for my brother. And so I was in the hotel room getting ready, getting my hair, putting on a little makeup just to be presentable and honor my brother. And my dad was freaking out, and he's old school, raised in a Orthodox home. And apparently, at the time, I thought he just hated me. I mean, it was the spitting, it was the throwing books at me, telling me he disowned me because I was making it like a party. And I didn't understand. But now I don't have to take that personally, because that's what, unfortunately, we're supposed to do, I guess, as Jewish people, is cover mirrors. But my dad just took it to such an extreme. But that might be because his parents, ruled by a belt, and they were religious, and it was religion that was the fear that he had about what I was doing, and it was wrong religiously for him. It was really hard. But now I don't take it personally. I see that it was just an extreme interpretation of honors and codes of ethics and stuff.
also, possibly he was channeling his grief or projecting his grief into, you have to follow the letter of the law, because he was so grief stricken. So it is kind of an emotional disturbance. You know what I mean? The grief and the pain and the loss was so horrible that he was now just focused on these rules. People do that. They depend on, they transfer their pain into something else. So, okay, any other comments about this extreme response to a parent who is acting badly or acting strangely? We won't say badly. Robert, you're muted. You're muted.
I can really feel for people who had difficult parents who really, violated the bond of parent and child. And I think that I love all of the intention of this and trying to implement it when it makes sense. But there are some parents who have truly violated the trust of their children and truly make trying to adhere to these principles sort of like a futile masochistic exercise. So I just feel for anybody who really in their heart wanted to be that kind of a son or daughter, but their parents made it impossible. And it doesn't seem fair to throw that all on the doorstep of the child.
Well, the next page, the headline is When Not to Obey.
Oh.
There you go.
When not to obey. Okay, so does somebody want to read the first paragraph or two of When Not to Obey? Somebody else? Okay, Barbara.
When not to obey. These mitzvot are integral parts of Torah and subject thereto. They can never apply to incidents that would contravene the letter or spirit of the Torah.
In other words, this is part of the Torah, but you can't use it as an excuse to break other rules or other mitzvahs in the Torah. Keep going.
Ye shall revere every man his mother and his father, and ye shall keep my Sabbaths. I am the Lord your God.
So now they're asking, why is that in the same sentence? you shall revere, you shall fear your parents, and you shall keep the Shabbos. Why is that in the same sentence? Okay, Barbara, read.
The Torah juxtaposes the observance of the Sabbath to the fear of one's father in order to teach you that although I admonish you regarding the reverence of your father, yet if he bids you to desecrate the Sabbath, do not listen to him. And the same is the case with any of the other commandments. For I am the Lord your God. Both you and your father are equally bound in duty to honor me.
Just finish.
Do not
Sorry, that's
therefore,
my house. It's going to stop in a minute. I apologize.
do not therefore obey him if it results in disobeying my words.
So here we see that, yes, you have to honor your parents, but if they say steal this, insult someone, lie, cheat, kill, which, it's okay to be bad in business. It's okay to do any of these things. You do not listen to your parents because the Torah is from God, the logic is, and God's commandments come before your father or mother's commandments. So this gives you the mandate to say, I can't and I won't, and it's wrong if you are pushed that way. So the rabbis are very aware that, there are parents who are abusive, as Robert said, or parents who will demand something wrong, and they concern themselves with that. Barbara, did you want to say something?
Yes, I read through this already, and I didn't see anything that kind of addresses what Robert was talking about, where someone directly, or Abby for that matter, where someone directly abuses the child. Telling a child to steal is an abuse of a sort, but directly abusing the child. I didn't see anything in here that addresses that. And I actually have a little insight into this because I was brought up in an Orthodox home, as you know. And so I happened to be the victim of that type of thing. And what happened when they got older was I did provide, I visited. I cannot say I did it cheerfully, but till they died, they were cared for, they were visited, and they had everything that they should have had and all through the death, where they had someone sitting with them and everything after they died till they were buried.
I'm going to go and research that because obviously I bet I can find something and then I'll let you comment. But we know in the Torah it says, do not stand idly by while the blood of your fellow is being spilled, meaning you can't stand by when there's abuse going on. It doesn't have to be literal blood. And so really, especially in the case of a child, if a child tells you, you are obligated to interfere. Somebody, it's very hard for, Rabbi Leader loves this phrase, which I really like. It's in the Talmud says, the prisoner cannot free himself. In other words, there are some situations where the victim cannot take care of it, and save him or herself. They need help from others. And so you're right. I'm going to look and see if it says something about that. Are you talking physical abuse or emotional abuse? I don't know which one, but either
I think they're closely tied.
Yes,
but
either one.
Both.
No one can stand by and let that happen. You have to intervene, especially a child. So that is one, but I'm going to look and see if the rabbis go deeper into that idea of honoring the parents and what the limit is.
Rabbi Nanus?
Robert?
Rabbi Nanus? Yeah.
Yes.
What's interesting about this is all of the limitations apply to vis-a-vis a third party. I think in most family dynamic situations, the more, I would guess the more common issue would be you are the recipient of the abuse. And how do your needs stack up in the Torah versus your parents when you're not being treated properly? And I think that's the where the pedal hits the metal on a lot of these ethical and moral issues. It's the self versus the higher purpose.
I'm going to look into it. I'm going to do some research and see if there's more modern commentary. Okay, Jeff, and then Abby. Okay.
I just have one question about the use of the words reverence versus honor.
Right.
We revere God. We revere things that are idyllic and perfect in nature. Honor is an action between humans and has value and has to be earned. So that honor would be the word that I would prefer when we talk about human relations, parent to child, etc. But reverence, I don't think any of us relates to revering our parents.
Well, the word is actually yirah, it's fear, fear or awe or revere. And that's in the book of Deuteronomy. And it's interesting because if we think about the theory that the Torah was written by 4 different authors, the 5th book, the Deuteronomist book, was written by a totally different author, several hundred years after the rest of the Torah. And that was his take on it. You know what I mean? If you're Orthodox, you think it's all from God, but if we're looking at, it's a different word. And also it's mother and father, as opposed to in the book of Exodus, it's father and mother. And the rabbis say, well, it's easy to honor your mother. It's harder to fear your mother. And so that's why they put mother first the second time. But I'm not in disagreement with you. And what I am going to look up for next time, I've had it before, but I want to print it out. What do the parents owe their children? What do parents are obliged to do for their children? So I think that's a very interesting thing we should look at next week before we move on to the next one. And then let's just go a little further into this.
Rabbi Nanus.
Yes. Abby, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I just wanted to add that on Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, there is like you go through this thing, but there's a statement there. They go, if your parents were abusive, then you read this other thing.
Oh, which book is that?
I don't know, but I'm very aware of it because it's like very, like I'm reading this and I'm, and I know my, what I went through. But then it says, if your parents were abused, it's in whatever. I know it's there because it's definitely there.
That's good.
So it's somewhere in the service there when you're saying you honor your parent. I don't know, I just, got involved in religion about 5 years ago. So
Yeah, you're very aware of that.
But yeah, in the Yom Kippur and in the service, they actually have a thing that and I know it was in the conservative, because I did it was at Sinai in the conservative prayer book.
Right.
So just
it's very interesting that until maybe the 60s, even, what people did in their own homes was very private. We didn't really know about abuse. We didn't know about domestic violence of wives. Men could rape their wives with impunity. Men could beat their wives. If you look at old movies, sometimes you'll see this awful treatment of women that you just you took for granted, in movies from the 30s and 40s. I just saw one where this guy says, "Food, woman," like that. And I go, oh my God. And nobody would have even thought of it, when the movie was made. So there's a lot of consciousness, raised, a lot of awareness about child abuse, about spousal abuse that we're much more sensitive to. And the rabbis, as this was written in, 200 CE, 300 CE. So we have to upgrade it. And I'm going to look for some modern commentaries on that. Just this last thing before there's a list, it says if parents would order their child to transgress a positive or negative command set forth in the Torah, or even a command of a rabbinic origin, the child must disregard the order. So there is that ability to not be forced to do something wrong, but how do you defend yourself from abuse? We haven't found that in the Talmud yet.
Can I say something?
Yes, who is it? Oh, yes, Cassandra. Go ahead.
We
Sandy.
have to consider the community, because when this was written, people lived closely together and the community was involved, and parties might restrain these irrational parents. Whereas now, because we live so isolated, there is no third party who would immediately intervene unless the neighbor calls protective services. So I think the fact that our culture has changed makes us look at this and have to interpret it differently, because otherwise the situation seems so cruel that the child should just suffer this way if they're blameless. That's why I initially suggested it brings up the issue of Job, who was blameless, and yet God, the parent, treated him
Horribly.
like he was a pawn in a game with the devil.
Right. You're right. That's a very troubling book, Job. Miriam.
I agree with Cassandra in a way, and in a way I don't agree. Because today, yesteryear, we might have heard children's screams coming out of a house. And we said, well, that's their family, that's their business. We may not interfere in their personal lives. And today, Cassandra, we are mandated to not let this happen. Teachers, if they see any kind of abuse on a child physically, or if they can detect even emotional abuse, are mandated to get in touch with the proper channels and the proper services. So in a way, perhaps we're isolated, but on the other hand, we cannot let it go, and we must not. And to take an example of, I'm not waxing political, not for a moment, but take the example where we all witnessed abuse on television, abuse to the point of death. It was far beyond abuse. We were witnessing a murder.
Right.
Therefore, we are now told we may not go back to where we were before. We may not remain silent. How you want to speak up, you will find your own channels, but you must not go back to silence.
Well, yes, I totally agree with you. And I gave you a list, some basic laws of honoring parents, but there are two that defend the children. So I wanted to just focus on these before we conclude. One of them, now this is exactly what we were talking about. If the mind of his father or mother is affected, one should make every effort to indulge the vagaries of the stricken parent until God will have mercy on the affected. But if the condition of the parent has grown worse and the son is no longer able to endure the strain, he may leave his father or mother, provided he delegates others to give the parent proper care.
Okay.
So here in the Talmud, they're saying you can put your parents in a place or have proper care if it's too much for you. You do your best, but when you can't, you don't get sick and die over it. You can, if that means putting them in assisted living, putting them where they need to be, but you should still come and visit them, take them in, take them out. The other one is, although children are commanded to go to the aforementioned lengths in their relationship with their parents, the parent is forbidden to impose too heavy a yoke upon them, to be too exacting with them in matters pertaining to his honor, lest he cause them to stumble. He should forgive them and shut his eyes, for a parent has the right to forego the honor due him. So it's not yet addressing abuse, which I'm going to look for, but it does say that a parent cannot be unreasonable and burden the child to such a degree that they're going to stumble, meaning who knows? We know abuse causes kids to do drugs, get drunk, be sexually promiscuous, to fall, to ruin their lives. So the parent is not allowed to do that. So there is some protection for the child, though I do believe most of these laws are not for, minors. This is for adult children to do. They're not expecting, you should respect your parents, but I also think that there was an assumption, false or true, that parents were loving basically and, you know, nurturing, and that that was the norm, whether it was or wasn't. I mean, with human nature doesn't change. So there always must have been abusive parents at all times. And I'm going to search for some commentary on what to do when a parent is abusive. I know in modern times, as Miriam said, a rabbi is mandated also. If we see abuse, we're trained, we have to report it. Of an elder abuse, we have to report, and child abuse or any kind of abuse. Yes, Abby.
Well, now I was a dentist before, but now as a psychologist, I'm a mandated reporter. And you have no idea how many times I have called DCSF and they do it is so difficult. It's so sad. It's so sad.
Yes, I've heard that. I mean, that's
I have no qualms about calling, and you almost have to beg them.
Wow, that is really upsetting.
Yeah.
Talia.
When I was getting a divorce, we had a mediator, but then I consulted with this one lawyer because I felt that possibly my daughter's dad wasn't being very safe with her, took her onto a set, she got injured, and I was like, and she said, with the courts, like they could bring your spouse, bring them, or your ex could bring back the kid almost near death, and they still won't even change like the days, you know, for who has custody, the custody schedule. And I was just mortified. And she told me, she's like, yeah, she has seen that over and over, that even with custody, if a parent is abusive, whatever it is, they could bring the kid back near death and it still won't even sway the judges from changing a schedule if it's already like written. It's just crazy how common sense seems to go out the window just because there's, I don't know, something written.
Yes.
Anyway.
Well, that's for family court, and yeah, it's very hard. Yeah.
That is sad and discouraging.
And they always want reunification of the family. Like in Arizona, I worked as a behavioral health technician at a group home, and the kids, it was like suffering severe abuse repeated. And the whole focus of the state was reunification of the family.
Exactly.
Here too.
Well, in that case, parents do not deserve to be honored. I think everybody would agree with that. And I will look for some content about that. But next week, we're going to talk about, tzedakah, gazing in deeds of, I want to deal with guests and visiting the sick, because you will be surprised how specific the Talmud is about how to treat guests and how to visit the sick. And I've taught this before, but when you visit a sick person, according to the Talmud, you remove 1/60th of their pain. So you can save a life by visiting the sick. So we'll talk about that next time. And I wish you a good week.
You too.
And, early Shabbat Shalom. And I'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.